The South African Water Chamber was established to form a credible link between the private sector and government, and its mission is redistribution and privilege through dignified employment and inclusive economic growth enabled by water. We've got a very special guest with us today, the Executive Director of the Institute of Plumbing of South Africa, Brendan Reynolds. It's a nonprofit recognized as the recognized voice of the South African plumbing industry, and it consults with governmental and regulatory bodies on both national and international law. So don't go away and join us for this special episode with our guest today. And welcome to the Water Hour. If you haven't yet followed us on the Water Hour, please click on the follow link so that next time we go live, you get a notification when we do. I'm your host, Bridget Limbanda from Cape Town in South Africa, and this live stream is brought to you by BeLive Media and the South African Water Chamber. Now, this is an audience-centric show, and we are monitoring the comments, so please feel free to ask a question, make a comment throughout the show, and we'd be very happy for you to do that. So let me welcome the team from the South African Water Chamber firstly. And so if you can just do a quick round of introductions. Fred, if we can start with you, and then Benoit, and then Hamant, just a very quick introduction to the South African Water Chamber and what you do.
Thank you, Brigitte, and welcome to the viewers. And there's a couple of hardy-dars in the background, so I hope that they also tuned in. So the South African Water Chamber was really established with the purpose of galvanizing the business into understanding the importance of water, the challenge that we face as a country with regards to water, and I think we're now seeing that play out as a major problem and a major inhibitor of economic growth, and then creating a credible platform for engagement with government to say we're here to reach out our hands and to build forward and to make sure that we take hands in addressing the water problems that we face within the country.
Thanks very much for that, Fred. Benoit, if you can just give a quick introduction of yourself and your contribution from the Water Chamber side.
Sure, thanks, Brigitte, and welcome to our listeners and guests and panelists, and specifically Brendan from the Institute of Plumbers of South Africa, which are really the heart that distributes all our water, hot and cold, leaking, everything. We'll have some interesting chats on there. From a Water Chamber perspective, what's really endearing with the problems we have is that water is being highlighted as a systemic risk to the potential collapse of the country due to the energy state of disaster. The water risk was gazetted last week. Whilst none of us enjoy the gazettes on states of disaster, let's look at the good side of it. I mean, the crisis is real. It's actually a catastrophe, but the good side is that it's being acknowledged. And, like any disease, once you're know what you've got, you can then work on trying to cure it. And it's a long road ahead. We have to, and through shows like this, we're happy to actually spread the word, get the, let's say, the water agenda onto the table. I've seen neighbors drilling for water, not finding it, 100, 200 meters, not finding it, and saying, life has no guarantees. You cannot go off grid when it comes to water. It's not that easy. Farmers can, it's not that easy in the towns. So we're all interconnected, and we've got to come together, and this is what the Chamber is doing, is trying to coalesce, aggregate, and catalyze the next chapter in inculcating water security. And I'm glad to say that we've had very good exposure with the media, very good exposure with government and through the public-private growth initiative. And things are starting to synchronize. And the next steps are the difficult ones, because the water sector per se, the EPCs and the likes are not seeing the work in the last 18 months. I was shocked to hear this in an update last week. It's actually incredible that we haven't kickstarted. So the Chamber is really key to help kickstart it, so that ourselves with government, so national, provincial, and local, we can kickstart our rejuvenation program. We're not waiting for elections. We've got to kickstart now. We're going into an 8 to 10-year El Nino cycle. It's going to be dry. The dams are full, but we've got no water. So, but El Nino will make it a bit more difficult, because we won't have the backup in our minds. So I'm really looking forward to today's discussion.
Thanks very much, Benoit. And then Hamant, if you could just give a brief introduction of yourself as well, that will be great.
Thank you, Brigitte. Good afternoon to the listeners, colleagues. Nice to have Brandon on the show today. Looking forward to a dialogue, importantly on the plumbing matters affecting South Africa. I think it's well established that we have some very serious challenges with water and sanitation supply in South Africa and performance, etc. So my own background is, academic, utility, and now I serve more as a consultant. I serve on boards of companies. I advise organizations locally, globally, on how to improve utility performance. For example, I'm the director of the Utility Partnerships Division of Rock Blue, where we service some 27 million people in 5 countries, and we assist these utilities to improve their performance. Involved in both water and sanitation, looking at how we can improve the situation in South Africa and the rest of the continent, and drawing from the best practices from across the world. So looking forward to this afternoon show. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Hamant. And yes, definitely looking forward to today's discussion. Our special guest today is Brendan Reynolds. He's the Executive Director of the Institute of Plumbing in South Africa. Brendan has been involved in the plumbing industry for over 30 years and follows a proud family tradition stretching back 3 generations in the plumbing industry. Now, he worked himself up from a general worker to become the youngest branch manager for PlumLink. Who doesn't know PlumLink? We all do. And he eventually became the regional general manager and an EXCO member. He served on various boards, both within the industry and in other capacities. And with that, I think let's just give a very warm welcome to Brendan. Brendan, thank you so much for joining us today. Much appreciated. Thanks for making yourself available. I'm sure that your position is a very interesting one, given our exceptional challenges that we have today. There's a lot of unintended consequences of the power crisis and water crisis that we're experiencing. From your perspective, if we can just kick off straight away with you, what are some of the unique challenges that you have seen develop over the last couple of months, especially in terms of buildings and households and businesses? What are some of the unique challenges that you have seen, and what can we do about them?
Thank you, and thanks for having me. It's great to be here. So yeah, I think over the last couple of months, really the big thing that we've seen is the number of water outages, either planned or a lot of them unplanned. The frequency is becoming it's becoming extremely regular now for us to see water cuts throughout the country. We used to see quite a lot of it in smaller rural areas, but now we're seeing it in the metros, and pretty much it's become standard practice throughout the country that we're seeing a lot of water outages. And that's dramatically changing the plumbing world for plumbers out there as consumers and homeowners and business owners are trying to find solutions. So I think over the last couple of months, that's been the big change that we've seen. Obviously, that stems from many years of neglect of maintenance and frankly, poor management by a number of the municipalities. That's as Benoit has often said, is the chickens coming home to roost. So I think over the last couple of months, that's a big trend we've seen.
How has this affected the business community, and how is there a solution? And one of the things that Benoit has stressed very often, and also Tony and also Hamant, is that our systems were never designed for load shedding conditions. What are some of the bottlenecks that is causing, especially for business, for hospitals? What are some of the unique challenges that we're seeing there?
Yeah, so I think very often when people talk about our water situation, they tend to talk about the dams and the bulk infrastructure. As plumbers, our interest really starts after the water meter. As the piping and the water enters the buildings, and so some of the big issues are both the bulk water supply system as well as the more localized supply system within buildings were never designed to have these shocks that are placed on them, particularly from air. They were designed to carry water at a particular volume and a particular pressure, and they certainly weren't designed for the air. And what happens is, I don't want to get too technical, but it really causes significant damage to the piping systems and the endpoints, the actual point of use. So that's one thing. The other thing is, obviously, water meters were never designed to have air flowing through them. And what happens is when the air flows through a water meter, it spins and it moves much faster and it shows a much higher volume than there actually was. So consumers are paying and businesses are paying for essentially double and triple for air that's passing through the water meter as opposed to the normal water. And there's you can try whatever you want to do with the municipality to explain to them that there was air coming through your water meter. They look at that water meter reading. And so what we're seeing is particularly businesses and normal homeowners that have the financial capacity to do so are looking for solutions. So we're seeing huge investments in boreholes, in rainwater harvesting, in grey water harvesting, and even more and more we're starting to see even black water harvesting and on-site waste treatment. Now, these are great options to augment your supply, but it's very difficult to get completely off grid with water and with sanitation. It's nearly impossible in urban areas. So these types of things are really great to augment your supply and maybe to assist you when supply is down. But really going off grid is tough, and businesses are scrambling for solutions and struggling to find them and spending a lot of money trying to find those solutions.
So a practical question I've got is something that, our local councillor, every time when we have load shedding, he sends us a message on WhatsApp and he says, please don't use the toilet when we're being load shed. Can you tell us why that's important? Because, you know, I think people need to know.
Yeah, it differs from area to area, and it depends where you're getting your water from, and you know, sort of what your elevation is. But there are a lot of areas that are at a higher elevation that that when there is power cuts, that the municipality is unable to pump enough water, and you simply the reservoir is going to run out. That's as simple as that. So you get in particular areas where councillors or community groups are saying, please try not to use water for a couple of hours during load shedding. Other areas that are low lying, they'll probably still get pretty decent water supply. So yeah, it's great for the high lying areas to try and do what they can to reduce their consumption. But unless everybody in the area, everybody in that that's getting water from that supply does the same, the reservoirs are still going to run dry. And we're seeing that again more and more often, that reservoirs are actually running dry.
And what is the risk to us if that should happen?
Well, obviously the primary risk is that you don't have water, and there's a lot of hygiene issues that are around that. But more importantly is that there's quite significant damage that occurs to infrastructure, as well as, you know, similar to load shedding. When the power's on and off, your appliances tend to take a bit of a hammering, and I think everybody's probably experienced that. They've lost a TV or they've lost a microwave or something due to load shedding. A similar type of thing happens with your plumbing components. So if there's no water, then the element on your geyser can burn out. It can damage the actual pipes. The hydraulic force at times can actually knock fittings right off the pipe at times. And obviously, as I said earlier, is the issues with the water meters, where once they do put the water back on and you open a tap, and all this air that's in the big bulk line, it needs to be pushed out somewhere. It's got to go somewhere, and that air, you end up paying for water consumption that wasn't actually there. There's one more thing that I think is also important to recognize from a health perspective, is that within any pipe, there's a normal and a natural biofilm that forms, and it freaks people out to talk about biofilm forming in their pipes, but it's a normal and natural thing, and it's quite safe, and it just kind of sticks on the side of the pipe, and it lives there and it does its thing. And it doesn't really get into our water supply. Now, when you stick a whole lot of air through, and you create a whole lot of turbulence and additional forces within the pipes, very often it starts to knock that biofilm off, and then that's ending up coming through into our drinking water, into our filters, into our geysers, our taps, and that's not great.
Now, Fred, I believe you've got a question for Brendan.
Thanks, Brigitte. Brendan, yeah, thank you. Thanks for making time to come and chat to us. We're dealing with a crisis. So on the one hand, we have a crisis in getting water to the meter, and that's an issue that we're dealing with and need to deal with. And probably one of the most important issues in this country is dealing with the leaks before it gets to the meter. But then when we get inside, that challenge now comes over to the property owner or whatever, and we have an immediate problem of dealing with resilience, if I can call it that. So you need to build in some form of reaction to the problem that's being caused outside of your wall, and that obviously looks at what you've been speaking about. But my question is, because we should never let Benoit always says a good crisis go to waste. What is the role that the Plumbing Institute and the plumbing industry or plumbing professionals should be playing in terms of water sensitive design and management in our our homes and commercial facilities, etc. Because clearly what we need to do is we need to reduce the demand wherever possible. We need to secure the supply so that we don't have the type of damages that you're talking about. And then we need to say what is the opportunity for responsible and reuse, but taking into account all of the other factors that come into play there with regards to health and all of those type of challenges. So for me, just to simplify that question, because I've said a lot, is I believe that we need to get a new mindset in terms of how we deal and how we manage water. From a demand perspective, from a potentially a water-sensitive plumbing design, potentially bringing in a tube plumbing system. I hope you understand my question.
Very much, and it sounds like a very simple question, but it's a little bit complex, and it's going to take a little bit of background just for me to explain where I'm coming from. So you're quite right. We definitely need better designed plumbing systems. We need smarter plumbing systems, and we need things like backup water storage, the use of grey water, reuse of wastewater, and that sort of thing. But all of that presupposes that we have a well-educated plumber out there, and we do have a lot of them. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of excellent plumbers that keep themselves on the bleeding edge of technology. There is a lot of them out there. But the reality is there's approximately between 100 and 120,000 people in South Africa that call themselves a plumber. Out of those, only around 20 to 30,000 are actually qualified. And that qualification doesn't necessarily speak to their capacity and capability to use these type of new technologies. On top of that, we have a recent research that we did. We were only able to find 80 municipalities out of the 270 odd that actually have water services bylaws in place. Now, the water services bylaw is what is used to police or to enforce the regulations and the bylaws of a municipality in terms of how plumbing installations are done. So understanding that background of where we are, we start to see that the level of non-compliance of products that are being used, and as an example, a study just came out the last couple of days from an organization called CLASP, who had a look at shower heads in South Africa. Now the legal requirement is that shower heads should use a maximum of 10 liters per minute. But 58% of the shower heads on sale in South Africa use at least 27 liters per minute. And that's just a small item to indicate to you that the lack of enforcement that's taking place. You know, as many people have said in the past, we've got very good laws. We've actually got some really good laws, but there's no enforcement and no implementation of the laws. So taking that as a background, we now introduce a whole series of new technologies. For example, black water harvesting, grey water harvesting, rainwater harvesting, all these types of things, which on the surface of it sound quite simple, but actually are quite complex and need to be treated in a particular way. And now you're asking this unregulated plumbing community to start doing these installations. And that's where the big concern comes in, because it's not being regulated. Even though the law requires that it be regulated, it's simply not happening. And so there's a big danger here. So there's a great opportunity for the plumbing industry, and there's a great opportunity for our country to come up with good solutions for this crisis that we're facing. But there's a big component of risk in that. And we really need to manage that, because it's we're talking about people's health and safety.
So one of the biggest challenges you say really is not the lack of bylaws, but it's the enforcement of those bylaws that isn't an issue. Is that, if I understand correctly?
Well, there's two sides to the coin. There's 80 odd municipalities out of the 270 odd that have water services bylaws. So there's still 190 odd, call it 200 odd municipalities that simply don't have water services bylaws. So that's number one. And then the second part of it is where there are bylaws in place, with the exception of 5 or 6 of the metros, they simply are not being enforced. And so that is just aggravating the problem. And what that leads to, besides the difficulties in introducing new technologies, is, you know, we see things like the interconnection of sewage systems and rainwater systems. So we end up getting millions and millions and millions of liters of rainwater every time it rains entering the sewer system. And that's going then through the municipal infrastructure. It's going to the wastewater treatment plants, and they simply can't cope with it. Now, again, it's such a small, simple thing, but if the plumber is not properly qualified and not properly trained, they don't understand what interconnection is and how it happens and why it happens. And then they end up sticking all the rainwater from a house into the sewer system. And that's when we see the manholes popping up open during rainstorms, and we see sewage flooding the streets, ultimately running into our rivers and our dams. And even the opposite is true. You know, we came across a couple of weeks ago, we were asked to have a look at a very big nursery school in Gauteng. I won't mention the name. And the entire wastewater and sewage from this big nursery school, it was a really big nursery school, was connected directly into the stormwater system. So as long as we've got these kinds of things happening, we continue to pollute our freshwater resources. We continue to damage our wastewater treatment works, and then obviously, you know, our ability to effectively introduce new technologies that can solve, or not solve the problem, but mitigate the problem, is reduced.
Wow, that's quite hectic. Benoit, I think you've got a question for Brendan.
It's actually more an observation on the problems, and I'll reiterate the challenges, how we address the problems. But you know, we're a country where the rule of law, like our constitution, was thrown out the window 30 years ago. People didn't realize it then. It was thrown out the window. A lot of us said it, and we were chastised for it, and now we sit with egg on everybody's faces. The absolute abject disregard for the rule of law. You know, we don't have health inspectors. We've got cholera going around. We've got people trying to fix rivers who are in hospital with cholera now. And I mean, the phones went mad last week with this cholera issue and all this. All of it is preventable. All problems are preventable, but most of them are. But you know, as a society, it's the rule of law doesn't rule. It's the anarchy that rules. You know, so if you just listen to what Brendan was saying, for example, on the air going through the meters, I've had dozens of people sending me messages. What I do, my meeting is redlining like this. Okay, I said to them, don't speak to your bank manager. You know, it's because you can do nothing about, except if we had smart meters. So I just want to prove a point. It's not a technology issue. A smart meter will pick it up straight away, and we'll log it as an error, and we'll take it off your meter reading. Okay, this has been around for 20 years. That's the first thing. The second thing, in our systems, as I might have explained to us, are not meant to run dry, they're meant to run wet. However, having said that, for the next 10 to 20 years, they will run dry. Okay, what do? You've got air vents. It took my municipality, Ekurhuleni, okay, it doesn't matter who rules, then they are useless. Okay, and they're as useless as all the other metros apart from Cape Town, and I say that because I know the difference, is that it took them 6 months to put an air vent on a bulk line, and it's a 225mm bulk line. It's not even a really big one. Okay. Now, we don't have enough of them, but they put it in because our system systems were going down all the time because the air was pushing the fittings off as pushing the pipes apart. Okay, never mind our fittings and all the like. But we could put air vents in all the bulk lines so that we don't land up with air accumulating systems, and we could put air vents. Okay, it's a very easy, cheap technology on a 15 mil or a 25 mil, half inch, 1 inch in old speak on every meter, could be incorporated in the meter so that if air is coming in, because you can't afford a smart meter, what happens is the air will bleed off and then the water, will come in. They are funny. There are these they might seem funny, they might seem basic, but they're very easy to do, but there's no governance. So you can have the best technology in the world. If there's no will to run a society successfully, nothing is going to happen. And this is what we have to do. We have to, through the crisis we have, is inculcate the rule of law. I had to block 12 people on LinkedIn this last week because they were propagating anarchy. Okay? Now, these are the enemies of the state. We do not want these people to promote anarchy. And these are well-heeled people. They've got lots of money, and they want anarchy. Okay? I don't associate the rule of law to me is the only way to go, the way society functions, and we have to do it. So between all of our associations, we have to somehow get the food inspectors, we have the bylaw inspectors, we have to get this in. My traffic lights haven't been working for nearly 8 months. Now we've got the beggars on the street. Just now they might be part of the illegal plumbing fraternity, Brandon. We've got these illegal guys causing accidents in the street. Okay, so I feel like running them over, but that's not going to help. That's being an anarchist. Okay, so I stop. Then people hoot at me for stopping because there's a traffic warden who's not a traffic warden. We need to re-inculcate the rule of law. We have to respect each other. We have to respect the rule of law. Australia went through this about 3 decades ago with drunken driving and managed to overcome it because the neighbor would tell on the neighbor and the likes. It doesn't sound pretty, but you know what? It works. If people do not stick to the rule of law, they bring us all down. And we need to reinstate governance, because what we're seeing and what Brandon is showing us is that in actual fact, it doesn't matter what technology, how many plumbers we have, 80% of the plumbers are illegal. Okay, so your house will pop, your solar system will pop, you'll have a fire, etc., flood your house. The insurance won't pay. So I think we need to reboot our society, and let's not wait for the top. There's no leadership over there at the moment. We know that. Okay, it's a sinking ship. Let's do it ourselves. We all need to lead by example to do this. And from a water perspective, there's no alternative. So we've got to do it right. Okay. And unfortunately, in our area, we had these people trying to sink a borehole. They didn't speak to me first. And they blamed me for it because of the post I put in our group. And then, but they didn't speak to me first. And I would have told them there's no water. We know there's no water. Okay. So why sink the borehole? A lot of people have tried over the last 20 years, and there is no water. So they're going to spend 150 grand, 100 meters done, there's no water. Okay. Now, in actual fact, they got the water, I think they would have regretted it, because it's not good either. Okay. So, we need to work together. We've got social media to do the good things. Let's not do the bad things on social media. Let's try and do the good things. And, I really painful for Brandon, because I know when we were involved with DTRC and the likes and the reindustrialization master plan, is that a lot of the components that are being imported do not comply. And why don't they comply to SAWC? And the SAWC standards are very good. It's because government's not policing SAWC. So customs not policing, stars not policing. We've got all the rubbish coming in. So you can go and spend 10, 20 grand upgrading your system and pops. What happens there? The governance issue. So I don't know how to overstate the governance issue, but we have to reinstate the rule of law. I'm not talking about the police here. I'm not talking about a police state. I'm talking about the basic things that keep society functional. Okay, driving through a red robot. Okay, you should spend a year in community service. Okay, because I see it every day. My wife doesn't want to go in the car with me because I sit on my hooter. Okay, I can count the few seconds I'm off my hooter. Why? Because I think society needs to operate with reasonable rules of law. Okay, can you imagine bringing up your kids and telling them leave the tap open, let it just run? It doesn't matter. No, we need to reboot. And it's past the stage of jokes. We really have to. And, in industry where 80%, basically, Brandon, if I remember right, 80% are illegal. They are not professionally registered. Okay, that is a disaster to me. And in actual fact, it just shows me how decrepit our society is. and I'm ashamed to be a South African but what I'm not ashamed of is I will fight this until we turn it around, because this is really not on, and there's no substitute for water. We cannot be these cowering, ashamed South Africans doing illegal things. We must do things properly. We can. We used to be world leaders. What is wrong with us? So that's my rant for the day. I'll probably carry on at dinner time again. But the thing is, if I stop and I leave, what happens then? We can't all leave and just leave it. We have to do something about it. And social media is such a good tool. Okay, and the blocking feature is quite good, because it's really 1 or 2% who are the idiots and you can't use idiot on Twitter. They suspended me for a week for using that term, and I've been called a lot of funny things related to sounds, ears, and the like. So that's not not that. Let's use the good tools we have to propagate, like we're doing now, to propagate what can be done, how it can be done. And in actual fact, I think we need to also put crackers amongst our councillors, because Brigitte, we used to have active councillors. Now, Ekurhuleni strategy is nothing. We see they've all disappeared. We hear nothing, we see nothing. Well, what we see is disaster. They don't collect our rubbish, and our roads are collapsing. Our water's on and off. The electricity, I understand that's a national issue. So what we really need to do is we need to get our councillors to work. We need our neighbours to work with us, and we need the business associations. And I see a lot of it happening at the moment with PPGR and Tribuse. A lot of the business associations are collaborating and the likes. So the majority want the rule of law. Okay, so if we all push together like the French are doing at the moment, they're doing it for the wrong reason, in my opinion, but that's my opinion, is they're all in the streets and they're fighting something out of a principle, and they will win. So, and there's no violence. We will win if we do this right. And without water, there's no life, there's no business, there's no nothing. Electricity is alternatives. With water, we mustn't play around. Waterborne diseases are the biggest killers outside of natural death, especially in Africa. We have to take it seriously.
Absolutely, definitely not a laughing matter. We can do without electricity, but water we absolutely can't do without. So, Brendan, I'm going to give this question to you from Hein Goos. He is from Nova V Pumping Solutions, and he asks whether we know if the municipalities have got any planned upgrade maintenance on sewage infrastructure. Now, I know that the city of Cape Town has got a plan, but what about the other municipalities? Can you shed some light on it, Brendan?
So, to my knowledge, City of Cape Town is pretty much the only one. I think they recently hit the 50-kilometer mark. And they're hoping to get up to over 100 kilometers of sewage networks that are going to be replaced and upgraded. As for the rest, I don't know. Honestly, don't know. Haven't heard anything, haven't seen anything. And I can tell you that we were in a meeting with one of the large district municipalities, which I don't want to name, but their total budgeted capex for the year was 30 million. That's not on water and sanitation. That's not on anything in particular. It is their total budgeted capex for the year. So, if some of the larger district municipalities, if that's the type of capital expenditure they have, I promise you there's no way they're going to be replacing very much sewer. So, long story to answer the question, no, I don't know, except for Cape Town. I've heard talk from the city of Johannesburg that they're going to be doing something, but we've seen nothing concrete, no plans, no tenders, nothing of the kind. So I think we're still very much in trouble on that front.
That is going to be a major challenge moving forward. Welcome, Anthony, to the show. Glad to have you join us. And if I just want to say to everyone, if our sound and stuff is less than perfect, I think we're all doing the best we can with the challenges at hand, but we've decided that we'll go ahead with the show regardless, and we'll just do the best we can. So thanks very much for bearing with us. Anthony, I don't know if you've been able to follow the conversation so far we're talking about the challenges that the plumbing industry is seeing. And if you've got any questions for Brendan or comments on what we've just talked about so far. Okay, we seem to have a bit of a sound loss going on there. Brendan, moving forward, given the challenges that we've got, and they are absolutely huge, is there a bright side to this? Are there any positives in terms of solutions moving forward, or are we just looking at a mammoth problem for which we don't have an answer?
It's a tough question, eh? So no, there are positives. I think that certainly in the plumbing industry, the private sector has really pulled together to try and find workable solutions. I think very much like the SA Water Chamber is doing, is we've gone out there, and in fact, I'm traveling to Germany tomorrow. Once again, it's on a study tour. We're looking for solutions. We're looking for things that we can bring back to South Africa that will work and that will help. So there are solutions out there, and they're not super complicated solutions. It's not that we need to reinvent the wheel. There's fairly simple solutions that are available. The technology is there. We might need to train some people on the new technologies, and we might need to uplift some people, but the technology is there, and the solutions are there. We just need to implement them, and we, unfortunately, as the private sector, we can't do it on our own. We have to do it together with government. As Benoit was saying, we've got to work together. We've got to fix this, and politics be damned. Let's forget about the politics. Let's forget about who the light's going to shine on more than somebody else, and let's get rid of the corrupt people, and let's just solve the problem. Because at the end of the day, when there's no water, there'll be no water for everybody. That's the bottom line. So we'll all live through this, or we're all going to die through this crisis together. So the solutions are there. We can fix them relatively simply if there's will to do it.
I think what you've basically said there is just reiterated what the Water Chamber has been saying for a very long time, is that we've got the technology at hand, and it's just we need the political willpower to support the solutions that we've got. And I think one of the other things we've also stressed that it's not a lack of finances. Again, it's that political willpower as the backbone that's going to be the game changer here in terms of moving forward and seeing solutions. Anthony, I see you I see you've unmuted yourself. If you got a comment or question that you wanted to add?
Hi, good afternoon. I've always been of the opinion that there is no shortage of technologies, and there is also no shortage of capital. We've said this many times on this show, and I think what Brendan's saying now is just simply reconfirming that. The solutions ultimately come down to political decision making and political will to implement. That's really where it comes down to. And until we can solve that problem, I'm afraid we're going to keep spinning around in circles. Back to you.
Thanks very much. Brendan, just from your perspective, as we've got to start rounding up. Unfortunately, I've also got load shedding coming. What are some of the things that you would like the business community to know, and then what are some of the things you'd like homeowners to know moving forward?
Yeah. So it's the same story for both of them. There are a lot of very highly qualified and highly skilled plumbers out there, and really be careful of who you choose to use. I think at the end of the day, you've got to recognize that this person that you're selecting is working on the water that you are drinking, that you bath your children in, that you wash your dishes in, that you wash your clothes in, that you play with in your swimming pool or whatever. And at the same time, they are responsible for removing the most hazardous waste that you produce as a human being away from your home and disposing of it safely and securely. Things like a geyser can be an extremely dangerous piece of equipment if it's not installed correctly. So people shouldn't take this lightly. And when you're choosing to use the services of a plumber, make sure that that plumber is properly qualified, that they know what they're doing. Maybe check their references, check if they registered with an appropriate body, because really this person, you're putting your life in this and your family's lives in this person's hands. And I'm not joking when I say that, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that. We see so many horror stories of businesses and homeowners that have used the services of somebody that really doesn't know what they're doing, and then ending up becoming sick or having huge damage to their property or terrible scalding, waterborne diseases. There's a lot of nasty stuff that can happen. Plumbing is not just sticking two pipes together. The design and the reasons for the design and the safety mechanisms that are in place are there for a reason, and they're there to protect you. So really think long and hard and make sure that you choose a plumber that knows what they're doing and that is properly qualified to work on your plumbing.
I'm going to follow that up with another question. How do you know for sure that a plumber's qualifications are legitimate when you seek their services?
It's so difficult. In the old days, plumbers would have to register with the municipality, with a council. In the old days, it used to be called, you have to register with a council, and the council would have taken the necessary steps to ensure that that person was properly qualified. Now, that all fell through with the introduction of the national building regulations, and municipalities are actually not allowed to register plumbers anymore. So there actually is no national register of plumbers. So recently, about 10 years ago, we assisted in the establishment of a professional body for plumbers, which is called the Plumbing Industry Registration Board. And through that mechanism, we're encouraging qualified plumbers to register with it. It's not a requirement yet. Obviously, we're trying to get that brought in as a requirement, but it is very difficult. So at the moment, I would recommend having a look, is this plumber registered with a professional body, or are they a member of an organization like IOPSA? And that should give you some comfort that they are properly qualified. We do have a service where we are able to verify people's qualifications through QCTO. Unfortunately, that does take about a week generally to get a response. So it is tricky. And the sad thing is, the reason we've got that verification is that we see even those that have got a qualification paper, roughly 20% of those are fraudulent. So it's really, really a difficult situation, and we're trying to fill this gap of sort of monitoring that government agencies should be doing. We're trying as best we can. So again, long story short, I would suggest that you make sure that the person is registered with a recognized body.
Wow, that's quite a slippery slope. Trying to identify that your plumber is a bona fide plumber. That's a big problem. I mean, as a private person, there's no way of me being able to verify that. So that's very difficult, and even for I imagine that is a huge headache for building management. And for businesses, because I think it could be quite a costly mistake if you use someone that's not verified in plumbing. And as you said, we can't play around with our water systems because diseases and things can happen. Any final comments, questions from our panel today?
Yeah, Bridget, if I may, it's been very, very useful. Thank you, Brendan. I think we've all learned a lot. I think a couple of things. Firstly, we all face the same problem, so I think it's critical that we align with an organization like IOPSA and see how we can support and work on these challenges together. The idea that the crisis creates opportunity, I think, is true. But what I'm also learning is that we've got to be careful that the crisis doesn't drive the wrong behavior, and that we don't end up with a boer maak 'n plan situation, which could have dire effects if done incorrectly. So I think from my side, it's just a question of how do we align our efforts, how do we support each other, and how do we, at the end of the day, work together towards strengthening the institution, which has been hollowed out over time, and we get to that issue that Benoit gave us a lecture on, and that is the strengthening the institution, the rule of law, and providing the framework within which we can operate effectively as a nation, and where we can address the very, very severe problems that we're currently facing.
Yeah, thanks, Fred. I think there's great opportunities. Benoit and I have been talking quite a bit, and as you know, we've worked together on the industrialization master plan from the Water Department of Trade and Industry, and there's various other sectors. So I think we maybe need to sit around a table and just have a discussion, but we've got to all come together, stop working in silos, and find ways to work together with government to resolve these issues.
Thanks very much, Brendan, and thanks very much, gentlemen. I think this was very, very informative, both for business and for many of us citizens out there. So thank you very much. Appreciate you joining us today, Brendan, and making time for us. Anthony, Benoit, any final comments before we close?
I would just like to say that the more I engage like this, the more I realize that we really are in a very, very difficult situation in South Africa. And the more I see that there's willingness to cooperate, and that's great. But ultimately, we have to be able to cooperate with the people, with the authority, and that's government. They're the ones that ultimately we have to bring along with us. We can't just do it on our own. So that's the big challenge.
Absolutely. Benoit, any final comment from your side?
I agree from my side. Thanks, Brandon, for coming through. And I think it's really important to focus past the water meter, as we've seen. The issues are the same as before the water meter, and in the end, it's up to the associations and the likes to try and reinstall some logic, governance, and some common sense, and how we force that horse to drink from the water, that government horse, is the challenge. Is how do we do that? And the ballot box is not the only solution. It's how do we actually do that? I say to Fred and my colleagues very often, UK went through 3 prime ministers last year. Did the water and lights switch off? Ukraine went to war. The Russians threatened to bomb them. Gas got off. Did the water and lights go off? No, it didn't. Okay, so there's a semi-world war. There's a whole lot of political issues happening, but the civil service operates. In South Africa, we have to extricate our basic services from politics. We have to depoliticize the basic services. I honestly don't know what to do more than what we're doing now. We persevere with it, but I think we will have succeeded to a great extent when we can decouple our basic services of water, waste, electricity, roads, communications, and like. We can decouple them from the day-to-day politics and even the month-to-month politics and the political cycles, because we're always in electioneering. And I think how we do that, and I'm pretty sure the civil servants want that too, because they don't want this political meddling and non-committal and the likes. It's just, we want it to work, and civil servants go home to water. They need water, electricity, so they have the same issues as us. And I think it's how we address that. And I think associations are one of the ways, apart from the other active citizenry organizations we have, to actually do that. But thanks a lot, Brendan, for opening my eyes, certainly.
Thanks very much, gentlemen, and a special thank you to you again, Brendan, from IOPSA for joining us today on the Water Hour. Take care, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Please, if you're watching this on the replay, feel free to leave a comment or a question, and we'll get back to that later. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you back on the next episode of the Water Hour.